So, folks, I think we gotta talk about the fact that Donald Trump has entered full-on panic mode. I think they've got some internal polling that is absolutely devastating, because the external polling is really bad. Like, it's obviously really bad, what is available to those of us outside the Trump White House. It's not looking good for Donald Trump. He's at term 2 lows. He's lower at this point than he was at this point last time. He's lower at this point than Biden was during his presidency at this point. It's going poorly, in other words. But one of the ways you can really tell it's going poorly is that in an effort to desperately patch up the holes in his approval, he's going around and trying to specifically tell soldiers to vote for his guys. Like, he has a literal captive audience here where he's going in front of members of the military and telling them they have to vote for the GOP, which I want to be really clear here. Under normal circumstances, this would be a presidency-ending type of scandal. Like, if Joe Biden had gone out in front of the troops and said, you have to vote for Democrats, he would have been kicked out of office immediately. Like, this is illegal. It's not supposed... You cannot do this. But he's doing it. And he's doing it specifically because he's desperate as hell. I mean, and the coverage of this is not great either. President Donald Trump's rally on Friday followed a familiar plan. He entered to Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA, promoted GOP candidates, bashed his predecessor, and implored the audience to vote Republican in the midterm elections. The speech ended to the thump of the Village People's YMCA. The setting, however, was an army base and the audience was in uniform. And it's just like, will these soldiers vote for this guy? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. This isn't the first time he's done this, but in the past, he's typically kept it limited to generals or members of the leadership. And what he's doing now is trying to mass campaign in areas that he thinks are going to be influential for the upcoming midterms, right? Not only that, he's also freaking out about potentially his money well going dry, right? So essentially what he's trying to argue in court right now is that as president, he is simply too busy to be on the receiving end of a civil lawsuit. Okay? This is something that's actively going on right now. Specifically, two of the founders of Truth Social have been suing him. This story has largely gone under the radar, I think. But two of the founders of Truth Social are trying to sue him. His response to it is, well, I'm president, so I'm simply too busy. You know, defer that lawsuit until after I'm president. And like, that might work if he was in fact busy, so busy that he couldn't possibly do something like, say, file his own civil lawsuit. Except that Donald Trump has filed his own civil lawsuit against himself. Genuinely, Donald Trump is now suing the federal government in order to recoup some, not recoup, in order to get around $10 billion. He wants $10 billion. Let's just take a look at him talking about this.
Did you make a comment at the dinner about saying that you would sue?
About what?
About suing Morris because not lower pressure?
Yes, it's a roast. It's a roast. It's a comedy now.
So it's a joke.
And of course, it's all comedy.
And the worst thing is, you're suing the IRS. Talk a little bit about what it's like to be on both sides of a lawsuit.
It's very interesting. I have another one where, I've virtually won the Mar-a-Lago break-in suit. have to work out some kind of a settlement. I'm supposed to work out a settlement with myself. Because, you know, when the FBI broke in, we sued. Before I was president, I sued. And obviously it was a very good suit. And I have that one, and I have to work out a settlement.
Like, he's seriously like, yes, I'm suing myself for $10 billion, and then I'll figure out a settlement with myself. Like, dude's literally just finding time to self-deal to himself as president. It is the most openly corrupt thing I've ever seen in my life. This is like the bank manager walking into the safe and then walking out with a bag full of cash and just being like, I paid myself for the month, and then like walking out like nothing ever happened. It's crazy. It's genuinely crazy. Even The Onion couldn't write this. You're right. Part of the reason that he's trying to grab any and everything, right? He's just trying to grab any and everything. Because in part, he's losing. So you all might remember, like a couple weeks ago, an exhibit on slavery was taken down in Philadelphia. And, well, it turns out, a federal judge ordered that was done illegally, and now it has to be restored.
Thanks to you all, your presence, and your activism, I have great news. We just won in federal court. There'll be more details later, but give yourselves a big round of applause. We have won. Let's say that. We have won. We have won. We have won. We have won.
Like, he's losing on issues big and small all over the place. Many of you may have seen the headline about the pride flag being removed from Stonewall. Well, guess what? Folks came by and put it back up under new, not auspices, but like new regulations from the city. Like, they cannot keep from losing. The Trump administration is a machine built to lose. You know? They cannot keep up this kind of pressure, and it's why I like to keep coming back to the idea that what's happening right now with the Trump administration is an extinction event. It's a death spasm, you know? Like, I gotta be honest, every single thing I read from Donald Trump these days reads as absolute desperation. Here's a post from him the other day. The Democrats refuse to vote for voter ID or citizenship. The reason is very simple. They want to continue to cheat in the elections. This was not what our founders desired. And I have searched the depths of legal arguments not yet articulated or vetted on this subject and will be presenting an irrefutable one in the very near future. There will be voter ID for the midterm elections, whether approved by Congress or not. Also, the people of our country are insisting on citizenship and no mail-in ballots, with exceptions for military, disability, illness, or travel. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. This is crazy. This is a crazy person post. I've searched the depths of legal arguments not yet articulated. What does that mean? That's some, like, Lovecraftian prose right there. I found myself falling into the abyss of this library. Wrapped about in its tentacles of knowledge, I became lost in the annals of history, where things left unarticulable and unarticulated yet writhe. Like, what are you talking about? What are you doing? You know full well that man doesn't read. Of course he doesn't read. Of course he doesn't. Because also, this is something he said with his full chest the other day.
And you have confirmation U.S. citizenship. That's about a 99% one with Republicans, about 86% with Democrats, except Democrat politicians because they cheat on elections. And then you have no mail-in ballots. And there would be no mail-in ballots, very important. You know, we're the only country in the world that does a system like we do. We're the only country in the world that has mail-in ballots. The way we do this is unbelievable. It guarantees cheating. So it's no, and you have...
Wow, yeah, no other country in the world does mail-in ballots except for all of these countries. The United Kingdom, Austria, Japan, France, the Republic of Korea, Germany, Greece, Luxembourg, Lithuania, Liechtenstein, Marshall Islands, Poland, Iceland, Canada, Slovenia, Switzerland, Ireland, Federated States of Micronesia, Palau, Papua New Guinea, Spain, Fiji, Zimbabwe, Bangladesh, and Australia, Pakistan, Malaysia, the Netherlands, and India. Other than those, the United States is the only one with mail-in ballots. It's the only one, minus all of those other countries. Like, dude is not okay mentally. But interestingly, there is some speculation about what kind of legal theory Donald Trump might be putting forward here to try and justify...
The thing is, this isn't even a case of he could do this, but it would be illegal. Like others, the states have all the vote infrastructure.
Yeah, no, 100% Nomi Sunrider. Like, the only way the federal government could do this would be to send soldiers to every polling place in the country. Not ICE, because ICE does not have enough personnel. It would have to be, you send the military to occupy every voting station. That's just not gonna happen. You know? It's just not going to happen. But let's take a look at what his legal theory is. Jack, the legal theory is called soup for brains. Ho ho ho! I counter that with this fun election law blog on electionlawblog.org titled President Trump's claim of an irrefutable argument supporting his right to unilaterally impose voter ID and election rules may be based on insane claim that Marriott hotel manager found secret text in the shadows of a microfilm copy of the US Constitution. It's so much stupider than just soup brain. It's so much stupider than that. It's we're going to entirely untapped reservoirs of conspiracism, all right? We're going full on national fucking treasure, okay? Holy shit. One of the odd parts of Trump's post was the statement that I have searched the depths of legal arguments not yet articulated or vetted on this subject and will be presenting an irrefutable one in the near future. What could Trump have been referring to? I originally had no idea, but then a reader wrote to me for comment about an obscure post which seems insane but could explain the big Trump reveal to come. Quote, it's possible states innocently believe they have unrestrained constitutional authority to create election rules within their borders. But they're about to learn that's not so, reports John N. Goodman, a retired Hallandale Beach man who shared some research he conducted with a fellow election integrity advocate with links to the White House. That research found its way to Washington, D.C. recently when MyPillow founder Mike Lindell met with President Donald J. Trump. Good God, we got to get Mike Lindell in the next National Treasure movie. We got to do it. We got to chat. Lindell shared Goodman's research after Steve Stern, the vice chairman of the Broward County Republican Executive Committee, contacted Lindell. Stern confirmed. Stern was also contacted afterwards by a White House source verifying the president learned about Goodman's research. A former manager for Marriott Hotels, Goodman spent 6 weeks at the main branch of the Broward County Library System in Fort Lauderdale. He was reading a microfilm copy of the original U.S. Constitution, eventually spotting an apparent shadow that turned out to be a significant find.
Jambalaya brain?
We're getting there, Magar. He literally saw a shadow. According to Goodman, a Kentucky native, he stumbled upon wording that wasn't commonly known, although he speculates Supreme Court justices were familiar with the words because a majority opinion in U.S. term limits v. Thornton echoed that hollowed language. In an email this morning, he wrote, it's, quote, important to point out to your readers that the Constitution on the surface says that the states do have 100% power over elections, but there was an obstructed console that was not noticed for many, many years because it looks exactly like a faded shadow from the line above it. So I decided to go back the next day with a high-powered magnifier to add to the microfilm magnifier in order to still barely make out what it said. It said, dictate electoral outcomes unfairly, and the states cannot do that. And then the actual words dictate electoral outcomes is also in the 1995 Supreme Court case. They elaborate in great detail, such as the state's powers designed by the framers were meant to be procedural, and their actions cannot compromise integrity of the election to favor or disfavor a certain class of candidate or evade constitutional constraints. This treasure chest of constitutional finding, backed up by a Supreme Court decision, undermines the efforts of states that sought to keep Trump off the ballot in 2024 when he won a second term, Goodman argues. He also contends the huge expansion of vote by mail is a state action that tips the scale in favor of a certain candidate or party. Clearly, though, Goodman isn't a constitutional scholar, let alone an attorney. Or, let's be clear, any kind of historian that would be capable of verifying a claim like this. However, his research eventually put him in touch with two attorneys who are working with President Trump to clean up our voting system, he says. This connection provided him with some insight into what is about to unfold when the president announces action that includes a second executive order on election integrity. Key underpinnings for upcoming action, Goodman says, revolve around the 1995 Supreme Court decision. Another force driving President Trump is his belief that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen from him. In a phone conversation lasting more than an hour last night, Goodman, fascinated with politics since high school, spelled out his role as a private citizen and what he believes will happen soon. I gotta be honest, this does seemingly track with the level of mental erosion we've seen from Donald Trump. We found a secret clue written into the text of the original Constitution, only discoverable with modern day technology. And it says, if you zoom in really, really close, it says, Donald Trump wins. Always. And then there's a picture of Jesus Christ. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, we're at national treasure level soup brain. We have to send all these fuckers to prison. We really do. You know, like not one person in any of these Trump administrations should ever be able to like hold their head high in public ever again. I found a headshot of Jesus inside my micro constitution inside my pizza. I mean, that is effectively the level we're operating at now. But as all of this is going on, of course, Donald Trump is heavily pushing the Save America Act, right? Which has now passed the House. It's in the Senate for deliberation. So far, it has 50 votes. They need 60 votes in order to pass it. So far, we're in the clear. However, if Republicans do torpedo the filibuster, then they can pass it with a simple 50 majority, which is really, really scary because Lisa Murkowski is, I believe Murkowski, I get Murkowski and the other one confused. Or maybe it was Susan Collins. I can't remember which one it was. One of them doubled down and was like, yeah, I'll vote for this, and it puts us in a terrible spot. Yeah, and Dragonfly, I also am in the camp of they almost certainly won't torpedo the filibuster, but I genuinely don't have faith in Republicans to do the right thing ever, so we'll see. That being said, we need to make sure Democrats do not cave on the SAVE Act. So folks, if you have a Democratic senator, now would be a great time to call them and tell them you do not want them to support the SAVE Act. Do not vote for the SAVE Act. Okay? It is very much worth calling them right now to let them know, do not vote yes on SAVE Act. Save America Act. You know? Yep. 5 calls, baby. Make your call right now. You don't have to even talk to a real person. You can just leave a voicemail. You can send them a fax. You can do the things. It's just really important to put as much pressure on them as possible right now so that Democrats don't cave. Because as you all know, they have incredibly weak spines. Let's just take a look. How are Republicans handling this whole Save America Act thing when, it's maybe some uncomfortable questions are being asked? Here's U.S. Representative Chip Roy.
A lot of people are asking questions. They're saying, well, that's going to prevent women who've got complications with name changes. Hold on.
Just to be clear, women with complications around name changes represent a significant number of married women who changed their names after getting married.
We actually allow a fail-safe that you go and you can sign an affidavit that says, this is my driver's license. My name is Sarah Jones on my driver's license. Here's my birth certificate, Sarah Smith. I certify under penalty of perjury that I'm the same person. And we allow that. And we allow states to make other mechanisms under their laws to make sure that they match it. So we're just requiring a process.
That is all that would be required of a married woman? Because that is a major talking point coming from Democrats and across the mainstream.
That's all that would be required? Having to jump through hoops for like 75 million people? That's all that would be required?
Media that you are disenfranchising some 69 million married women.
A lot of people are asking.
And okay, so that's all that would be required. Okay. Let's take a little bit of a longer look at that claim, shall we? Let's take a little bit longer of a look at this claim.
The party of small government.
This specific interaction here that I managed to find is incredibly illuminating when it comes to the topic of how the Save America Act would unduly burden so many people in this country. It's ridiculous. Okay, so let's check this out.
Thank you, Ms. Houchin. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for engaging in this debate. And I do recall being on the House administration with the now chairman and how he was constantly opposed to any federal laws imposing on the states anything with regard to voting rights. So it's wonderful to see the change. Not really great. It's not wonderful because it's really sad what this is about. Can you take out your driver's license? You're in, and Mr. Scott has his out. If you took yours out, I'm looking at mine. Yeah. And what we're talking about here is, does your driver's license tell us where you were born? It does not. Does it?
No, not in the state of Wisconsin.
Mr. Scott, no. Yours doesn't either. Because what we're talking about is registration.
I really hate that for whatever reason, sometimes the captions change the opacity of the font, and you have to scroll down. It's stupid. It's all stupid. I've been trying to fix it all stream. I finally did it. Anyway.
And you cannot use this ID to register to vote under your bill. Is that correct, Mr. Tyler?
You could not use your ID. That would be an accurate statement. But you could, for example, if you were in the state of North Dakota. So if somebody here was in this.
But I'm asking, so in
Wisconsin,
many states, you could not use that ID to register to vote. But Chairman Stiles, do you have a passport?
I personally do have
a
passport.
You do have a passport.
I'm part of the roughly 50% of Americans.
You're roughly 50% of Americans have a passport because about 50% of Americans don't travel internationally. They don't have that money. Is that right? I mean, one of the reasons you have to have a certain amount of money to be able to travel internationally to get that passport, to pay for that passport. Is that correct?
There is a charge to get a U.S. passport.
21.3 million American citizens of voting age don't have ready access to citizenship documents. Does that sound about right, Chairman Stiles?
I don't have that data in front of me. Do you have a source of that data you'd like to share?
But if you said 50% don't have ready access to passports, I will.
They're two very different topics, of course.
Yeah, but that's one form
of citizenship verification in the bill is a passport.
Yeah.
Right.
Madam Chair, I request unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from the Bennett Center entitled 21.3 million American citizens of voting age don't have ready access to citizen documents.
Objection.
And this is ready access. And we already discussed earlier the fact that this bill, you have changed the enactment date of this bill to go in effect as soon as it is signed into law. If you could get this bill, like your goal would be to get this bill as soon as possible, right? Signed into law.
Yes.
And if that happens, then this 21.3 million American citizens who might not be prepared for a future in a few weeks in terms of Texas, who might want to, they're excited about the race, they're excited about the Republicans, senators who are running against each other and battling it out, they're excited about the Democrat primaries, they want to get involved, they want to register to vote, and they might be on one of the 21.3 million Americans who don't have ready access to citizenship documents. And that's what we are concerned about, is that by rushing this into law, you are going to prevent so many people from being able to register to vote. And that's,
that almost seems like it's exactly the purpose of the bill. It's almost like you're rushing it through in order to prevent people from voting. Isn't that curious? Doesn't that seem like the actual effect of the bill? Not your stated goal of the bill, but the actual effect of the bill. Curious, isn't it?
I think unacceptable. When you say how many illegal, immigrants or too many voting, I'd flip the question and ask you, how many eligible citizens are you worried about being turned away because you are rushing something like this into law? Do you care?
We have specifically considered that there may be individuals that are not in possession of documentary proof of evidence. And on page 12 of the legislative text, we put forward, in conjunction with what will be EAC guidance for applicants who do not provide or have that possession of documentary proof of citizenship, ultimately giving them avenues to be able to attest to their citizenship, which is still significantly stronger than underlying law. And because of the process as set forward in the legislation, I do not think we'll reach the concerns that you've brought forward today.
Yeah, and I think that this is interesting because we already heard from the ranking member that there is already an attestation. So now you're saying, well, it's all right because we're going to allow them to do basically an affidavit, an attestation. That's what is already required, is an attestation.
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? Like, if you're saying, well, you can just attest that you're a U.S. citizen, well, that's what voters already do when they register to vote. You're just designing it with additional paperwork to stop people who would otherwise vote from voting. It's just voter suppression. Release. Like just full stop. And not only that, this is such a non-problem. But part of the issue here is that Republicans live inside of a bubble where for decades they have been told time and time again that the real reason that elections are going towards Democrats is because undocumented folks are voting. Oh, well, the elections are rigged because the undocumented are voting. That's why the wealthy liberal elite want immigrants and refugees to come here. It's so that they can rig the elections by letting everyone vote illegally. Like, that is the genuine argument that many, many, many Republicans believe. And it's utterly insane and nonsense because the Heritage Foundation, which those of you who are out there know as the organization that wrote up Project 2025 for Donald Trump and the Trump administration, has a database where they track all of the voter fraud since 1980. They found 68 cases of non-citizens voting in that time. not the millions per year that Donald Trump alleges vote in these elections, 68. That is 68 votes in the last 40 years. In all of those 40 years, in all of those elections, over 1 billion votes have been, tallied. The rate of voter fraud by non-citizens in this country is below 0.0001%. And in order to prevent 0.0001% of voter fraud, Republicans are, for some reason, arguing that we should disenfranchise 21 million people. It doesn't make sense unless the goal is actually to disenfranchise people, just to be 100% clear.
But now you're going to make them a test and then go out and have to spend all that money to get those underlying documents. And I mean, that's a huge concern that I have. The other one is that you have eliminated the ability of people to register to vote, providing documentation, unless they do it.
Oh, come on. Why are we having trouble with this?
In person. I represent a huge rural area. My voters, people who are eligible to vote in my area, might need to travel 5 hours, 4 hours round trip, because we have a lot of space between us. We love those little towns and villages, but that's not where the county clerk's office is. And I have a major problem with the fact that, what are they going to do? Like, who's going to help them pay for that gas? Is there any way to help them pay for that gas? Can they apply for anything to help pay for that gas? Can they?
And this line of questioning here is designed specifically to ask, hey, is this not a roundabout method of imposing a poll tax? Because not everyone has the money to travel 6 hours round trip. Not everyone has the time to spend 6 hours round trip. Not everyone has the ability to get childcare. Not everyone has the ability to pay up the cost of travel and the cost of the documents that they need, A lot of people in America don't have, for example, their birth certificates, and they don't have an easy way of replacing said birth certificates. And shocking, I know many of you might be shocked to learn this, but this is a problem specifically with birth certificates that is more prevalent among the African American communities in America, largely, again, due to socioeconomic disparities that are the legacy of Jim Crow and slavery and such. And that's exactly why Republicans tailor these bills in the way that they do, because they are trying to cull out likely left-wing voters.
What are they going to do in terms of childcare?
Good God. Forbes breaking news. What is wrong with you?
So they can go register to vote during working hours. Because when a county clerk's office is open, Mr. Chairman Style?
It depends on the jurisdiction.
Generally, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Not during election season in the state of Wisconsin, but that may be the case in New Mexico.
Yeah. But generally, that's when they're open. And I think that that's the problem with this legislation, is it puts all this burden on eligible citizens who are going to be deterred from voting. Ranking member.
I do want to comment on that, because particularly for rural voters, and I hear my good friend Mr. Griffith, who also serves on Committee on House Administration. I've heard him say several occasions talking about the needs of rural voters. So think about this: 80 million rural Americans, many of whom register to vote online or via mail currently, have to travel significant distances now under this bill. And by the way, its registration is largely, for all the talk about voter ID, I haven't said a word about voter ID during this whole conversation. It's about registering, the difficulty in registering. They did narrow the number of things that states currently allow for voter ID, make it harder and harder. That is an actual fact of this. Student ID is no longer. But now you're going to have to drive. And just to, for instance, Inyo County, California, some voters would have to travel 378 miles round trip to their designated election office in order to register. 7 hours of driving. I don't know, does that sound like a burden to anybody? 7 hours in the car to register to vote? SAVE Act would force voters in Mojave County, Arizona to drive over 500 miles, crossing state lines several times in order to get to designated election offices. That doesn't seem extreme to anybody? You're going to turn over your data to the Department of Homeland Services and Christie Nome. You're going to have to drive, in some cases, particularly rural voters, hundreds of miles, hours and hours in the car. And by the way, God forbid you get to the election office after traveling 3.5 miles with another 3.5 mile trip to go home, and you forgot something that was one of your documentary proofs of documentation. God forbid, because that means you can't exercise your God-given inalienable right to vote as an American citizen. That's like, this is the party of small government. This is the party of rural voters. This is the party of participation. Really? I just mentioned all this. It is, to me, everybody glosses over that and wants to talk about voter ID. I haven't said a word about that. But think of these barriers. Think about, and then giving Homeland Security access to private
he did mean 3.5
voter
hours.
information. Boy, that should be enough to just get everyone to have real concerns about this bill, which was not marked up in committee.
Right, and the whole issue, because this bill doesn't sit here in a vacuum. This bill sits here with the statement that you made. Because what Trump asked for is Republicans to nationalize our federal elections. Trump asked and suggested that ICE officers, masked ICE officers with guns who've already killed citizens, are going to show up at our polling places. People are terrified. People are terrified of this. And it is called voter suppression because it doesn't exist in a vacuum. And the reason that people are worried about our election integrity is not because there's been widespread fraud, because as my colleague said, fraud gets prosecuted. It gets prosecuted. And interestingly enough, it tends to be more Republican than Democrat from some of the cases that we've seen. But they're worried because your president and your party have spent a long time denying elections and saying that he won places he did not, asking to find votes. This fits within a moment of time where there is an attack on elections and on election integrity. And you know, the thing is that Republicans keep lying to the American people, right? They keep telling us that somebody who was holding a phone was going to massacre ICE officers, even when we saw it with our own eyes. And then they want to blame immigrants. And
it is really nice to watch like this tag team of just bodying this particularly odious piece of legislation. It's kind of like watching like Goku and Vegeta team up against like Frieza or something. It's nice. I like it.
And we've already said immigrant voting is statistically meaningless, but what they are afraid of is the people who are going to vote. Republicans are afraid of the women vote. They're afraid of the people of color, of working families, and even given the tariffs that are...
And by the way, Republicans are afraid of women voting, which is why the name change thing is in there. Like, the name change thing is not in the SAVE Act to target trans people per se. Though they might, like, honestly, if you asked Republicans about it, they might say it's to do with, like, trans people doing fraud or whatever. But in reality, it is designed to attack women and women's suffrage, essentially. A lot of these folks, a lot of these people do not believe that women should be able to vote. They won't say that openly in debate. They won't say that openly on Capitol Hill, but they talk about it in their buddy clubs, with their bros, while smoking cigars and chuckling about some kind of misogynistic comment. Like, they do not, Republican men in Congress are more than willing to go along with attempting to disenfranchise tens of millions of women so that they can get an edge in their election. 100%. 100%. And like, I gotta be honest, you know, when I watched or heard about The Handmaid's Tale, because I only recently watched the first season, I was like, that sounds really heavy-handed. But like, genuinely, in the current moment we're in, where like they're past, they want to, this piece of legislation, the Save America Act, would mean that women have to attest to their eligibility to vote if they are married. That is some dystopian bullshit right there.
Beating people up and that Republicans are going to vote for, or maybe not in the rule, they're going to vote for tariffs. When Republicans vote for that rule tonight, they're voting for tariffs. And Americans don't like it. And instead of Republicans changing their policies, they're going to change the rules of who gets to register to vote and how expensive is it and how difficult is it. And that's different than using this ID to go and vote. This is about registering to vote. And I think that that really is the key thing. Representative Ranking Member Morale, I am the last Democrat on here, so I want to give you a chance. Is there anything that you've heard that you want to clarify?
Well, I thank you, and I appreciate the debate here, and which I'm sure will rage on. But this is ultimately making it extraordinarily difficult for millions of Americans to vote. You know, in some cases, you'd have to take a plane in Alaska just to register to vote because there's no other way to get to your polling place. 15 million rural Americans would have to travel to register an average of 259 miles to register to vote. 4 hours and 30 minutes. I don't know about anybody else, but that seems to me to be an extraordinary burden to be able to avail yourself of your right to participate at the ballot. So we're going to continue to highlight this. And
yeah, Von 400, we are not angry enough. So many more people need to be angrier.
Urge in the strongest terms that members reject this.
Thank you very much. And with that, Madam Chair, I would just like to point out that I have a chart here that's not dated. Otherwise, I would enter it into the record because it shows that in state after state after state, when there is that red line, it's because we are imposing more restrictive requirements on the states for registering and voting. And that's what they are. Is they're just making it harder. They're making it more expensive. They're going to charge you more for your right to vote. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you.
God. So, Geir Robelson, do we have any idea how likely it is that this legislation passes? So, my understanding right now is that this bill, the Save America Act, is up for a vote in the Senate. And thus far, Republicans have only been able to coalesce behind 50 votes, which means that if Republicans decide to destroy the filibuster, which they could do, J.D. Vance could step in as the tie-breaking vote, and essentially they could pass the Save America Act if they are willing to destroy the filibuster. However, it remains to be seen whether or not Republicans are willing to shatter that basic protection that they will certainly need to rely on after the midterms. The other part of this is, we need to make sure Democrats, for their part, don't cave and vote for this in order to look tough on crime or whatever the fuck, So the entire situation here is dependent on two things: Republicans not destroying the filibuster and Senate Democrats staying strong. So that is why you should call your senators and make sure that they are not going to cave and vote for this Save America Act. Okay? It's super, super, super important. Perhaps they calculate that this guarantees the midterm. Essentially, what the Save America Act is intended to do is to prevent Democrats from getting a majority in the House and the Senate. their goal is to try and keep control of Congress after the midterms, or at the very least, not allow Democrats to have control of Congress. And this is why, the name of the stream here includes Donald Trump is panicking. Because the worry that he has is that if Democrats win the House and the Senate, something that is within the realm of possibility, given the range of swings we've been seeing of 15, 20, 30, 40-point swings in some of these special elections. If Democrats win the House and the Senate, then he can be impeached and convicted. So Donald Trump is very motivated to do whatever he can to make sure Democrats do not win Congress. And so, we'll have to see what happens here. But he is very afraid. It's why he is constantly posting about these things. And I also want to say, it's worth noting here that they are actively trying to make getting documentation for voting harder. This is a story from the AP just a couple days ago. State Department orders nonprofit libraries to stop processing passport applications. Because again, the name of the game here is to slow everything down. Yes, Brassman, Democrats would need 60 senators to convict. My point is, if they win a majority in the Senate and actually have impeachment and conviction proceedings going, there are enough Republicans looking to break away from Donald Trump, especially after the midterms, where they get slaughtered, that they might be willing to, or at least a handful of them might be willing to vote to convict. But yes, it does require 60 votes to convict. But yeah, the name of the game here is voter suppression. Make it as hard as possible to actually get your passport, get your documentation for the bullshit, hoops that they needed to jump through, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I gotta be honest, people don't like this. Generally speaking, even Republicans don't like this.
And elections is another one of those critical infrastructure responsibilities that I have as well. And I would say that many people believe that it may be one of the most important things that we need to make sure we trust is reliable, and that when it gets to election day that we've been proactive to make sure that we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders to lead this country through the days that we have, knowing that people can trust it. And elections.
Yeah, Trump was super unpopular during his last term and still Republicans didn't break to convict because he had a future in politics. They knew he was going to run again. This time, however, there's going to be very little downside to voting to convict him. That's the point is, this time is not last time. And I feel like that's pretty obvious from all of the material circumstances that are at play at this point. The idea that any of these Republicans feel loyalty to Trump is laughable. They don't. They are all looking for an excuse to put a knife in his back the second it benefits them more than it hurts them. And I've been reading through a lot of takes about hey, what do we do? If we're worried about an attempt to if we're worried about an attempt to subvert the election and election integrity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, what do we do? And the conclusion that I really come down to here is we got to get more involved. That means organizing with your local Dems, means organizing with your local DSA, but it might also mean volunteering with your local election. Volunteer to be a poll watcher. Volunteer to work the election in your local area. If you are worried about it, get involved with it and help run it yourself. You can do that. All kinds of people chip in to help run election sites. You can too. You can be part of that bulwark that keeps them safe and secure. And again, I know that might not sound like much, but it will ground you in the reality of how these things work, as opposed to the abstract notion of how they work. And I also just want to point out here that yes, Donald Trump is now talking about aliens. And it's really weird. Based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena, and unidentified flying objects, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. God bless America. Like, this, I gotta be honest with you, this is the ultimate, like, break glass in case of emergency type of move. You know, like, oh man, my poll numbers are slipping. Oh geez, what do I do? Aliens. People like aliens. People like Independence Day. Let's, yeah, the aliens. They're legit. Don't pay any attention to my haters. Pay attention to the aliens. Meanwhile, how are other things going when looking at various folks running in elections? Here's John Ossoff. What's he up to?
What you can all clearly see. You can see it, right? Yes. Our nation is afflicted and in crisis. Americans losing insurance in the middle of chemo, hospitals closing down services to fund tax cuts for the very wealthiest people, masked federal agents profiling, brutalizing, and killing American citizens. And maybe amidst all the cruelty and the chaos, you start to feel a little doubt, and you start to wonder whether our republic can survive it. A government transformed into a tool of one man's vengeance and enrichment. A spiritually broken president who digs the moral pit deeper and deeper.
Who is this fella? This is John Ossoff. He's running for re-election in the Senate down in Georgia.
But Pastor, Proverbs says, whoever digs a pit whoever digs a pit will fall into it. And Scripture is full of kings brought low by their own arrogance. Ahab surrounded himself with 400 yes men, false prophets paid to affirm the king's delusions. And those delusions led him to his defeat. And among today's false prophets are the election deniers, who indulge this president's obsession with overturning the 2020 election. Now, hear me when I say this. They tell a lie so absurd and therefore so debasing to tell that the act of telling it proves the teller's total and humiliating submission. First, I will
I mean, like, it's the big lie, right? It's the big lie. He's correct. And, like, the fact that he's able to go into a church and, like, essentially preach like this, I mean, like, I don't know. It's not going well for Donald Trump, I'll tell you that much. Speaking of folks in the Senate, though, like, let's just take a quick look. Oh, what's that? Here's Senator John Curtis from Utah saying DHS Secretary Noem has lost trust following the Minneapolis shooting. Like, the Trump coalition is fragile right now. It is fragile as hell right now, and it is beginning to fracture under the weight of Epstein, under the weight of the fact that Trump is rapidly losing utility with every day that gets closer to the general election. He's in a whole lot of hot water, and he's losing. He's losing constantly. Here's just from earlier today. The Department of Education has ended its directive that attempted to restrict diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in schools nationwide. They don't have the ability to keep up this assault on our democracy. They're losing steam. And they're going to try bigger and bolder and more destructive things because that is what a wounded animal does. Additionally, folks like Marissa Kabas here are winning cases in court that allow them to have, for example, the entirety of the DC Metropolitan Police body cam footage related to the Doge raid on the U.S. Institute of Peace. All of these weird, deeply illegal things that have been done over the past year and some change are going to be brought into the light, and people are going to start being held responsible for it. It's not going to be one of those things where we just like, oh, well, it turns out Big Balls was just being a cool dude. Why can't you just leave him alone? And no, it turns out actually a lot of these people have committed colossal crimes against the United States government. And in some of these cases, there's some evidence to indicate that they committed those crimes in furtherance of another nation's objectives. I can never get out of my head the fact that a huge amount of data was transported to Russia following Doge insertion into various parts of the government. Like, Donald Trump is in a wretched state. Lowest poll numbers that he's had, lowest support on his number one issue that he's ever had. People are organizing in the streets. People are swinging elections that have never swung to Democrats before. They are, in fact, beating him everywhere. Like, if you can lose in as a MAGA candidate in deep red MAGA territory, oh man, Donald Trump's in trouble. Oof, Donald Trump's in trouble. And he knows it. He knows that as we get closer and closer to the midterms, it means that his hour of having unfettered power is coming to a close. And it means that an age of accountability is going to dawn. Because a Congress controlled by Democrats can haul Kristi Noem, can levy contempt, can, in fact, do a whole lot of things to curtail the worst things that Donald Trump has done to date. And it effectively renders him impotent for the next 2 years until a general election where he will, old and frail and ailing, slough off into the night to be hated by virtually everyone. And he's deeply scared of that. He is someone who has his entire life tried to cultivate an image of power, of vitality, of being liked by everybody. And ultimately, he will die alone and sad and confused and scared. Surrounded by people who know exactly the kind of monster he is. That's why he's freaking out over the midterms. That's why he's pushing this SAVE Act. And like, he convinced Republicans to gerrymander their states, but the swings we're seeing might render all of that a weapon against himself. And like, he's gonna try a lot to try and get himself out of this. It's one of the reasons I'm really, really worried about the massive troop buildup off the coast of Iran. Because I suspect that he is going to try and use a conflict with Iran in order to essentially boost his poll numbers. And like, he's willing to kill people in order to do it. He's willing to start a colossal regional conflict in order to try and become more popular. It's sickening. And I truly hope better heads prevail and that does not come to pass. But a wounded animal is when it's the most dangerous. So folks, let's get organized so that whatever happens with the Save America Act, whatever happens with, the voting situation in ICE, whatever happens, we need to get organized so that we can keep one another safe and so that we can make sure that we can make it to the elections and vote. You got to get organized. We got to beat these bastards. So join your local Dems, join your local DSA. If you need help, reach out on Discord to Gamergy for help with DSA. Reach out for help with Dems to Dragonfly. And let's all get prepared and get moving on this. Last but not least, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button. Please consider leaving a comment as well. Comments really help in the algorithm. And also, check out ImogeneOlivia.com, gender euphoric lingerie designed from the ground up for trans femmes. It's super cute and attractive and supportive, and it's genuinely the best underwear I've ever worn in my life. And I'm wearing it right now. It's super comfortable. So check it out, ImogeneOlivia.com, link down in the doobly-doo, and let's keep on going.
Riverboat deck is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube and swishy streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, dating, plenty more. Your sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's